This is the third of a series of 3 videos where we listen together to speeches of the famous economist Milton Friedman. My goal with these videos is not to give you my own opinion, but rather to try to put my biases aside and analyze these argumentations with a critical mindset.
Of course, many of the people who pour into Hong Kong will end up in conditions that most of us in the West would find appalling. Hong Kong is very far from utopia. It has its slums, its crime, its desperately poor people. But the people are free. That's, after all, why so many of them have come here. Here, they have the freedom and the opportunity to better themselves, to improve their lot, and many succeed. There's appalling poverty in Hong Kong, it's true, but the conditions of the people have been getting better over time. And that poverty, appalling to us, because we're accustomed to much higher standards of life, is not poverty as viewed by most of the people in the world. It's a poverty to which they would aspire, a state of affairs that they would like to achieve. There is an enormous amount of poverty in the world everywhere. There is no system that's perfect. There's no system that's going to eliminate completely poverty, in whatever sense. The question is, which system has the greatest chance, which is the best arrangement for enabling poor people to improve their lot? And on that, the evidence of history speaks with a single voice. I do not know any exception to the proposition that if you compare like with like, the freer the system, the better off the ordinary poor people have been.
Chicken wing, chicken leg.
When people are...
He's just stating here that every system implies poverty. There's no way around it. Since we cannot eliminate poverty, we might as well give the poor people the freedom to improve by themselves their social condition. Milton Friedman here is touching one of the most beautiful things that I found here in America. In case you don't know, I am Italian, grew up in Italy. I moved to the United States just about 3-4 years ago. I come from a free country too. You know, in Italy, we have the freedom to do whatever we want. We live in a democracy. But when I came to America, the difference was that I felt this empowerment to do whatever I wanted, especially the feeling that whatever I was dreaming of, whatever I could dream of, if I worked hard enough, I could get there. And that's something that in Italy is really not present. In my home country, no, nobody invites you to dream big or work harder to reach your impossible goals. And again, it's not that I couldn't do it in Italy. You still can do it, but if you're not surrounded by a social environment that really encourages you to do this, it's much harder to do. So if you have the type of personality, a little bit like me, that is very individualistic, with a lot of willpower, a lot of dreams and desire to try out new things or achieve things that are not considered common, then a place like the United States is an amazing place to live, because it is essential to have this kind of social environment where the standard attitude is dream big, and if you work hard enough, you can get there. This is the positive side for sure of this free market system, but there is a negative side as well. I mentioned how wonderful this type of environment is for a person like me, who tends to act very individualistically, has that aspiration to try new things in life, to do things a little bit unconventionally. But there are many other people who, what they need in life is to just be quiet, go with the flow, follow along the rest of the people, for which stability, financial stability, is the #1 priority. For these people, if they didn't choose to live in such a free place, it can be a problem. Because of course, a free market economy gives you the opportunity to change your situation, to improve your social status. But it also gives you the responsibility to do it. And a person like me might be okay with taking that responsibility, But many other people are not okay with that. Not everyone moved to Hong Kong to pursue their life goals. Many people are just born in Hong Kong, are just born in New York, are just born in a certain place. And maybe they would expect to have a little bit more social security, which they cannot find because they are considered by the society responsible for their own social position. I want to go back 1 second because he says something interesting.
For enabling poor people to improve their lot. And on that, the evidence of history speaks with a single voice. I do not know any exception to the proposition that if you compare like with like, the freer the system, the better off the ordinary poor people have been.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes me think that let's compare, for example, a poor people in the United States with a poor people in a third world country. Yes, I think I can do that a little bit because on YouTube, sometimes I like to watch videos of village people in third world countries. And of course, I live in New York City, so there's plenty of poor people just around me here in such a rich city. And yes, I can imagine how in the United States, a poor person would still have access to running water, for example, to an indoor toilet if they have a house at all. They have access to a food bank, for example, can still have heating, stuff like that. Whereas let's think about a family living in poor conditions on a mountain in Tibet. Yes, that's true. They wouldn't have running water. They would probably have to heat up with a fire in the middle of their house. They would have to rely on their animals, if they have any, for a lot of services, for heat, for work power, to get some kind of food or nutrition. So yes, if I compare the two, I can see how Friedman is right. In a free system, poor people tend to be better off. Nonetheless, let's compare for a second an individual that lives in poverty in a neighborhood of the Bronx here in New York City and an individual that lives in poverty on a mountain in Tibet. Which one of the two will perceive himself being poorer? I think there is a certain relativity to your perceived social status. If you live in a society where there are many social statuses, so they go from full poverty to extreme richness, your condition will be felt more intensely. I can bring again the example of my home country. While growing up, we were all more or less at the same level, middle class, you could call it. And growing up with the other kids of my same age in school and stuff like that, I never felt there was someone who was richer than the others or poorer than the others. Yes, I had a girl who lived in a castle, and she would go around brag about the fact that her family lived in a castle, but aside of that, everyone else, we didn't feel much social differences. But then I started traveling the world a little bit and I discovered that I grew up as a very rich person. You know, if you start traveling to poorer countries, for example, you realize that you were not so poor after all. Now I live in the United States and in one of the richest part of the United States, and I feel very poor. Everything is a little bit relative to what you see around you. So I bet a person who lives in poverty in New York City, a place where billionaires are just standard people that walk on the street, you are gonna feel much poorer. Whereas if you live on a mountain of Tibet, everyone else is gonna be more or less at the same level as you. You might be poorer, but you're not gonna feel such a huge gap between you and your neighbor. Of course, nowadays, there is also the problem of globalization. Since we have access to social media, for example, where we can see social media accounts from all around the world and we can see how people live their life standards, then that's another problem, because a kid in Tunisia might see an American kid living in Massachusetts, and he will certainly start to compare his lifestyle to the American kids' lifestyle and feel very poor, much poorer than if he lived without really knowing or having the perception of how kids of his age live in other countries.
When people are free, they are able to use their own resources most effectively, and you have a great deal of productivity, a great deal of opportunity. The major beneficiaries are always the small man. The man who has power, who's at the top of a society, he's going to do well whatever kind of society you have. It's the society which gives the small man the opportunity to go his way, which is going to benefit him the most.
Yes, this is another one of those things that I felt immediately when I came to America. It is very true. People here are so much more productive. In Italy, people are way more chill. They don't care so much about building businesses or improving their social situation, stuff like that. About opportunity, that's also very true, but everyone knows about this, especially about New York City. I mean, it's the immigrant city par excellence, so I don't need to talk about that. If you feel like you're lacking opportunities in your country, be sure that you can come to New York City and you will find any opportunity that you can imagine. Yes, it's really as great as they say. What I wonder though, especially after living in America for 3 years, is why do we need more productivity? Like what is, I have the sensation living in this country that everyone is trying to do more and more and more every day, every year, work more, be more productive. And sometimes I wonder why. Where are you rushing? We have a certain amount of years to live on this earth and then we're all gonna die. Why are you rushing all the time? Why are you trying to be productive all the time? What's the purpose of it? Especially nowadays that we see that all this productivity means ultimately consuming more. We produce in order to earn more money usually, and then we have to spend that money in something. So we consume more products so that the industries can produce more products, again, productivity, and then we know the catastrophic consequences that these have on our planet. So more often than not, I really wonder, why are people thinking that more productive means better? I'm more about finding a balance between being productive and resting, getting bored, reloading your energies. What do you think? Do you think that productive means necessarily better? I'm very curious about this one. I encourage you to go in the comment section and leave your thoughts there so that we can all read them and discuss about them. Please, I have a request. Don't just write down your opinion in one line, because that doesn't mean much to us in this context. We need rational explanation for what you write. So please, if you manifest your own opinion, your own stand, argue it rationally. Write down the reasons why you think that way. If you enjoyed this type of content, don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter. It's very well curated. It's an essay that comes out every month or every few months. I spend a lot of time preparing it. You can find the subscription form in any page of my website. See you in my next one.